G'day, Bomber fans, and also Happy New Year's, Bomber fans, or New Year's Eve. We've got one more day left to get through, which means we've got one more video left to get through as well. Before we start, just a massive thank you to you guys. You've been awesome this year. I've had, it hasn't been a fun year for Essendon fans, I think we know that, but I've actually had a lot of fun, and that's all because of you guys, so thank you. We move on to 2026, but first, let's get into this video. So the other day, I made a Christmas-themed video highlighting and analysing Essendon's younger half of the list. I talked about what the players might be wanting to improve on in 2026, or maybe what they might be asking Santa for Christmas. Today, being New Year's and all, we're going a different theme, we're going a different path. We are highlighting and analysing the senior players on the list, seeing what might be their weaknesses, what they might want to improve, or what their New Year's resolutions for 2026 are. So yeah, if you're confused why a player might not be in this video, it would be because they're in the other video I made, about the kids. They obviously still believe in Santa, so I tried to make it a bit more accessible to them. But we're getting to the senior players today, the mature players, which means we can probably be a little bit harsher as well. Let's start off with my boy Jaxon Prior, who I think won a lot of fans over in the back half of that season. He was shaky to start, he really was, but he settled in nicely after a while. Even during the injury crisis, I think he remained consistent and reliable as what he could be. The guy was sometimes playing on key forwards, like he was on Hudson O'Keefe one game, who was 2 meters tall, so he was as consistent and reliable as someone in that situation could be. He played every game for the year, which was rare in an injury crisis. But I think for Jaxon Prior, who's probably a depth option going into 2026, for him to really take a step forward, because we know he's a good defender, I think he probably needs a bit more to his game, some more layers to his game. We're going Shrek style here. I think Jaxon Prior in 2026 would be hoping to provide offensively as well. I don't mean he needs to go forward and kick 5 goals a game, but I think for Prior, who is defensively, I'd say more reliable than his stats suggest, because I looked at his one-on-one rate and he lost over a third of the one-on-ones he was in. But yeah, keep in mind, he was acting as a key defender at times, which is not his role. I think I like his defending, I like his toughness. I think he's reliable with what he does defensively, but I don't quite think he has the layers to his game to nail down a spot in that best 23 just yet. And that's coming from me. I'm a big Jaxon Prior fan, but I think with Prior, who is a really good kicker of the footy, we probably need to see him show that, because he averaged the 15 disposals, 15th most disposals for the year for the Bombers, 12th most meters gained, also just the 16th most handball receives, despite being a back half player. So those numbers are really low for someone who I think is a much better kick and user than what we see week to week. But you don't really include his kicking as a major strength in his game, because he doesn't actually use it that much. So I like Jaxon Prior as a depth player. I like what he does now for the team, and I'm really happy he's still on the list. He's going to provide us defensive depth, but if he wants to take that step forward and be a cemented best 23 option, I think he does just need to, add more to his game, some more layers, and a good way to do that would be to, provide some overlap, be that offensive contributor as well. Saad El Hawli, this is actually a really tough one, because I think Saad he's obviously exciting and energetic at his very best. The Port game, where he ran through the middle of Marvel Stadium, the Melbourne Gather-Round game, I thought he was pretty good as well, and that was his first full game. But he really does go missing at his worst. That is the thing with Saad El Hawli, is that he is maximum damage at his best, and he's not at his worst. And even in the VFL, he went missing a little bit as well in some quieter games. The one I think of most is the last game against the Gold Coast, where he had 3 kicks against the Suns in that final game. I think it's a tough one, because you could point to Saad being maybe in and out of the team in different roles. He started as the sub, played quite a few sub games before his full match, and then he would be in and out of the team a bit, kind of Zach Johnson-esque, being forced on the sub role, and really it was off the back of injuries as well. So I think with a fully fit team, he probably would have played more VFL footy in 2025, which I guess shows us what Saad is as a squad member. But for Saad to really take that next step forward and remain on the list, because I think that's probably the big question for 2025 and his contract year, I think we need to see him really increase the minimum output to his game. And that's a very vague way to go about this, but I think there are ways he can do that. I look at his composure in high pressure situations. He's a very damaging sprint heavy player. He really does love to get and go, but that can often be to his own detriment, and it can often hurt hurt the team as well. So I think he's someone who really needs to add tempo to his game. I wouldn't say Saad El Hawli has tempo yet, and he doesn't really often judge when to go or when to stop. And that's probably something that will come with more experience and time, hopefully. But yeah, as the player he is, as that wingman, I wonder if there is a different role for him in the team as well, and that's where, increasing the minimum output can come into things. Because I think when you're a winger, not often at the highest level of being a winger, it's hard to really remain consistent throughout games when you're on such good opponents. It's a really underrated position. I wonder if he'd be better on a back flank or something. Use that tank going forward and not having to be so focused on the defensive side of your game as well. Because yeah, I think that's something that he can improve on as well. Really, when I say increase minimum output, I mean increase quite a bit of his game to remain at a consistent pace when you're not playing at your very best. Because right now he's either at his very best or he's not. Nic Martin, now he's done his ACL. He won't play a game for 2026, which is obviously not good. You want him playing footy. It also means we can't really look out, to what he's doing on the field much. So I'm going to say, and this isn't me calling him a bad leader or anything, but I'm going to say Nic Martin could improve his leadership. I think he was getting to a stage last year where many fans, also, what do we know, but we were, saying maybe that's the future captain right there. Maybe that could be the face of Essendon. He obviously goes down with that ACL, so we're not going to see him for a year. But if he could really just learn as much as you can off these leaders around you, and also just off sources that you can find as well, to really improve your leadership, because we are looking at a potential captain candidate for the future when Andy McGrath decides to move on or pass the captaincy down. So this is probably a big year off field for Nic Martin and what he can do with his leadership, how active and vocal he is around the group despite not playing footy. So big year for Nic Martin despite him not being in the spotlight at all. Harry Jones, this is a really interesting one because he's an interesting player for 2026. He's going to be one of the more fascinating ones to keep an eye on because he's turning 25. He's played 7 games for the year in 2025. Yes, there was that injury, but before that, I don't think he was playing good footy. And that's after a really promising 2024 season on that wing. He moved as he was a centre half forward to start his career, kicked 20 goals in his first 16 games in his first year, moves on to a wing in 2024, wins the Everything Essendon Role Player of the Year award, if you remember. I thought he played some really good matches, and then it just, I don't know, was it regression in 2025? Was he just, struggling in a pretty poor team? It's hard to say, but you really want to see Harry Jones in 2026 become role reliable, because right now I don't know what to call him. Is he a utility? Is he a forward? Is he a wingman? It's not always a problem having that issue. In fact, I'm going to talk about a player later in the video who I will maybe want to become less role reliable. But with Harry Jones, this is someone who hasn't excelled in any one given role yet. He showed signs, but he hasn't excelled. And I think him moving between being a forward and a wingman isn't doing him much good. He's not getting much continuity in his game. I thought he showed signs in 2024, but he really does need to take that next step forward if he wants to stay in the team. Is he going to be a wingman ahead of Duursma or Fiorini? Is he going to be in that forward line ahead of, Langford or Peter Wright or someone like that? Yeah, in 2026, I want to know what Harry Jones is as a player. Jye Caldwell, he's a really tough player to criticise because he's just so darn good, isn't he? He's one of our cultural drivers at the club. He's one of our better midfielders. I think if we're nitpicking, I think Jye Caldwell, what he might be wanting to improve on in 2025 just in general is not just being a good midfielder in his team, but a good midfielder in the competition. So that's maybe the step that Jye Caldwell wants to take forward in 2026, become that great midfielder in the competition. And the way to do that for Jye Caldwell, again, it's pretty vague, but I think he has to improve his outside game, his outside damage. I think he's a very good inside midfielder, very capable in a negating role, which often flies under the radar because he actually wins a lot more of the footy that he should. So he's really underrated, Jye Caldwell. I think many fans would agree that he's a very, very good midfielder, but it's hard to really say that he's, hand on heart, a great midfielder in the competition just yet. He's shown signs. Those games, against Hawthorn in round 1 was awesome. He's had some 3-vote games. He's a really good midfielder at his best. But if he wants to take that next step forward, he has to go from 4 or 5 score involvements a game to 6 or 7 or 8. I think he's outside the top 50 for score involvements per game in 2025, which was shaping up to be a career best year for him if he stayed fit. So, yeah, I think Jye Caldwell just improve his is ball use. It'd be a punchier, well, not a punchier kick, but a more fluent kick of the footy, and really, improve yourself going forward as well, to be that inside-outside hybrid. Because right now, I'd say Jye Caldwell is more of an inside midfielder. Again, though, we are nitpicking. I personally don't care if Jye Caldwell is an All-Australian. I think he's a great player now as he is, but if he wants to take that next step forward, he'd probably want to improve his outside game a little more. Xavier Duursma, he is genuinely one of the better wingers or natural wingers in the competition. I think him and Fiorini is a really good wing duo. That's a great partnership. I really like a lot of what Duursma does. He is a really good player for the Bombers, best 23 certified. I think if he has to improve anything, it's his ball use. I noticed it a lot in 2025, and maybe that comes with more pressure around him. But he probably could sharpen up his ball use a fair bit, and that's mainly to do with his kicking. He's a high up and under kick, which is often okay. I think most of his kicking is okay, but this guy had some of the bigger clangers of 2025, I would say. Even in his better games, he'd be playing some awesome footy, and he'd have a clanger in there, which you just don't like, and I think he had a few too many in 2025. I really like him, though. I think this is one of our better players. He's a really important player, and you saw that when he was missing in games in 2024 as well, where he was missing on that wing, and you just noticed his how important he was structurally to the team. So yeah, he could be even more important for us if he sharpens up his ball use. Tom Edwards, a really hard player to judge, to be honest. I've seen him play, I think, 2 or 3 games of footy. To be fair, he kicked a few goals on his debut, so he can't be too bad. He's clearly reliable in front of the sticks, and he's very fit. His endurance is a bonus. The question is with Tom Edwards, what is his role going to be in 2026 with numbers around him? So we drafted him to the club as kind of that third tall in the forward line, and then since then we've added Archer May, we've added Liam McMahon, we've added Sullivan Roby, we've now got a really stacked key forward zone. Tom Edwards is not going to be higher up in the pecking order there, so I think for Tom Edwards, he just needs to find a new role. I think he needs to go away from being that that marking option in the forward line. Yes, he is a good marker of the footy, but I think he could lean in on that endurance more and be, maybe what Kyle Langford was to end the year, or maybe what Harry Jones was in 2024. I think this is someone who could benefit in changing up his roles to get in the team, for starters, because I don't know if Tom Edwards will play much footy in 2025. I think he's got AFL attributes, but it's tough to say, how he gets ahead of players in that forward line. So I think for Tom Edwards, probably start by finding a new role. Jordan Ridley. Now, I could say stay fit. That would be really easy here, because this is someone that is just a great footballer when he is fit. But I'm going to go maybe a little bit rogue here and criticise Jordan Ridley a bit. I don't think I've criticised him much at all in the last 5 years, because he's just such a damn good footballer. But I think lately, and maybe it's by design with the team as well, given the fact that we had to go backwards so much in 2025, not even by design, but because of how inexperienced we were. But I think Jordan Ridley has lost maybe that the attack in his game that he had early on in his career. So I think he, in 2026, will hopefully turn defence into attack more. He is such a good kick of the footy, one of the very best in the team, one of the very best decision makers in the team. I haven't really seen him properly take the game on in a long time. Again, that could be because 2025 was such a tough year for cohesion, and he never had the options in front of him to hit those targets. But he averaged under 300 metres gained a year in 2025. That is his lowest since 2020, which was his first proper season at the club. He's someone who could be in that 400, 500 mark, and has been at times in his career, but in 2025 he took steps back, and I think we saw a more reserved Jordan Ridley. Again, that could be the team, it could be his body not trusting it as much, but yeah, I think back to that Dreamtime game in 2023 or 2024 when he won the medal, and he was just absolutely everywhere. That's the Jordan Ridley that we know, where he's not only intercepting but driving the ball forward, progressing it forward. I don't think we've seen that in a long time for Jordan Ridley, so he needs to be turning defence into attack. Lachlan Blakiston is another really tough one to judge when you think about it, because he's a ruckman brought in the mid-season draft, plays pretty much every game as a key defender for the first time in his career with all those injuries. So we've only really seen Lachlan Blakiston play overall probably one full game of ruck in the AFL, which is not a lot to go off, because in 2026 he is going to be a ruckman. He's not going to be a key defender. We're only going to use him if there's injuries, and hopefully there's not that many injuries around. But I think for Lachlan Blakiston, from what I've seen as a ruckman, he's probably someone who will benefit from the rule changes with his athleticism. I think with ball in hand he can maybe be a little bit more composed. There's been a few times where he's taken on players in weird situations on ground level. He does things that ruckmen shouldn't always do. There are cardinal sins if you're a ruckman, and he's probably marked off all of them. But nah, he can maybe add a bit more composure to his game. And if he does that, I see no reason why he can't be our main ruckman in 2026. I think he could play quite a bit of footy next year, and I'm betting on it. So Lachie Blakiston just needs to add a bit more composure to his game. Andy McGrath. Now, you could copy and paste composure. I actually think it's slightly different, though. I think Andy McGrath is often quite composed in high-pressure situations, but he's always running himself into high-pressure situations, or not always, but that's probably the one downfall in his game that I can really think of, is the fact that he's quite often under pressure, and that is, quite often his own doing. So Andy McGrath probably needs to improve his game awareness or his decision-making a little bit, especially if you're captain. So this is where we're going to be real here, because I've been a big Andy McGrath fan throughout the years. I think he is a great player, and also just a great leader for the club. He's been awesome for us and durable and reliable for us in that defensive half. But if we do see those, parts of his game creep in more in 2026, if he hasn't improved his game awareness and his decision making as captain in the back half of the field, that's when I'll have a few worries. I have no doubts that he's going to be a great player for us. I'm just saying, if that starts to creep in and we start criticizing him more and more for that when it's due, then yeah, that'll be disappointing. But I've got no doubts. I think McGrath's definitely the right choice for captain and one of our better players. Setterfield, Sir William Setterfield. Now, I think with Setterfield, it's clearly you've got someone who's limited to what he can do on the footy field. I think that's fair to say. I think he's not a game-breaking midfielder. He never really will be, I don't think. Apologies, but I think he's a game-changing and often a game-dictating midfielder with what he does defensively. I think he can often be the player that helps swing the balance, in favour of his team. So I think at his very best, he's an important player for the Bombers in that midfield. The issue is, can you justify playing someone who is as one-dimensional as Setterfield is, and getting the best out of him defensively if you've got guys like Dyson Sharp, Caldwell, Durham all waiting in the wings? That's going to be the question, is if Essendon are fully fit, is Setterfield part of our midfield mix? I think naturally, if we've got some injuries to our team, he's always a good option in the midfield because of what he can do defensively. But if Parish, Caldwell, Durham are all fit, if Dyson Sharp's in there as well in his first year, or maybe Sullivan Roby, is Setterfield going to be there too? I think the answer is probably a no. That's why he needs more to his game, some more layers to his game. I took a while to get there to what he needed, but I just think he needs more than being that defensive midfielder. Maybe he can go back to, I think he played some footy in D50 a couple of years ago and looked okay. Maybe, he tries to see how he goes aerially. I don't know. He just needs something more to his game, Will Setterfield, than being that defensive midfielder if he wants to take that next step forward. I think, as a depth option, having that defensive option in the team is fine. But I think if Setterfield wants to stay on the team long term, he needs to add more layers to his game. Alrighty, Bomber fans. I'm getting the sense that we need to stop the yapping and have a bit of a break. Maybe sit down and have a drink. A drink break. Good idea. We've got an idea from Paulin, who has told me to have Jack Daniels and green ginger wine, which I haven't heard before. There were some ratios that I was supposed to follow and I didn't, so apologies, Paul. I have added some lime juice just because I'm crazy, and I've been having it throughout the video, and it's pretty good. I'm not a whiskey guy, but I'm going to give it a 6.5 out of 10. The issue with this part of the video is that I never remember who I was talking about before we braked for drinks. So, who was it? Okay, we're up to Ben McKay. I think for Ben McKay, and this is a really interesting player, by the way, because in 2024, he came across from North. He was defensively not amazing, but his intercepting was great. He was one of the better intercept defenders in the league in 2024, third most intercepts per game, and up there for intercept marks as well. In 2025, that flipped. His intercepting was low. He was better one-on-one in his defenders and more reliable back there, but his intercepting just wasn't as frequent. And I think if I'm judging Ben McKay as a player and the way that Essendon looked as a team, I'm probably backing in the 2024 Ben McKay. So if I'm wanting him to change his game in some way, it's probably regain that intercepting aggression. I don't want that to be at the expense of his defensive ability. So it's not me just saying, become an interceptor and not a defender. But I think if he could be better in one aspect of his game, it is that intercepting aggression, what he didn't have in 2025, because that was genuinely helpful for us a lot of the time, Ben McKay. The fact that he could win his own footy, win a lot of the stop attacks that were coming his way. In 2025, it felt like he was holding back a bit and not really, a lot of the time he'd be fisting instead of intercepting or focusing on corner's man, which is good to an extent, but I think we need more than what he was giving us in 2025. I liked him a lot the year before, so I think he needs to regain that intercepting aggression. And for Mason Redman, it's probably just about regaining that aggression, not even offensive or defensive. I think Mason Redman just needs to go out there and be a bit of a prick again. You know, I think back to prime Mason Redman, he is not only driving the ball forward and remaining accountable defensively, but he's getting under players' skins. He's someone who not only gets under opponents' skins, but backs up his teammates. And I think the last couple of years, we haven't seen that side of him as much, whether that is the performance of the players, whether it's his own performance letting him down a bit maybe. I think with the leadership structure that we have now, with no Zach Merrett, with the need for a vice-captain figure, that could be Mason Redman. And if he is to become that aggressive player that we really grew to love in 2022 and 2023, I think that'd go a long way for his leadership. Because I do think in many ways what Mason Redman does with that aggression is leadership-based. He's a really tough player. He's got a tough exterior, but it's for the good of the team. I don't think he goes overboard with it. It's kind of the, obviously to a lesser extent, but the Brendan Goddard type leadership, which I think you need. Zach Merrett's got it. He's obviously not in the leadership group anymore. He will remain a leader, but we need a really tough figure like that in the back half to kind of complement the nicer side of Andy McGrath. Mason Redman, I think, is that player. I'd really love him to see him regain that aggression that he had a couple of years ago. Jade Gresham, there's probably a bit to talk about with Jade Gresham, who is one of our senior players. I'm going to base it around pressure. I think with Jade Gresham, you get someone who at his best is genuinely a really good player. Like, there is no doubt about that. He's been one of Essendon's best players a few times since coming across to the club. That's the frustrating thing, by the way. That's like, some weeks he'll get 20 touches and 2 goals. Next week he'll get 9 disposals and do nothing with the footy. That sort of stuff is just intrinsic. That's a part of Jade Gresham's game. He's clearly got the ability, but there's conversations with his mind that's going on that probably keeps him from being at his very, very best. It's probably a bit too simplistic to say just improve that, because that's something that's a lot easier said than done. I think Jade Gresham has always been an inconsistent player, which is, some of the better players in the comp are inconsistent. But I think what you really need from Jade Gresham, what is a non-negotiable from Jade Gresham, is to be consistent, but with his pressure. I think, if he's going to have a 20 disposal, 2 goal game, that's great. If he's going to have a 7 disposal, 0 goal game, that's obviously not good. But what you need from both of those games at a minimum is hunting the footy, hunting the ball carrier. Because the thing is, he can. Like, it's not like it's something he's unable to do. I remember round 4 against Port Adelaide, the menace he was on ground level. He had 7 tackles and 20 touches and a goal against Port Adelaide. Two games later, he has 12 disposals and 1 tackle. That is light and day. It's not about the disposals for me. It's about the tackles and what goes along with it, because when he brings that energy, he usually plays better, but it's the fact is he doesn't always bring that energy that you really need in the forward line to quell attacking transition from your opponent. So I think for Jade Gresham, it's a big non-negotiable, and for him to stay in the team in 2026, he needs to remain consistent with his pressure. We can't just keep picking him in the team because at his best he plays good footy. That is not the way it should be. I think we need Jade Gresham in the team for his defensive pressure and what comes with it when he's up and about. Mr. Brayden Fiorini, a new addition to the team. I think it's, for me, I look at Brayden Fiorini as a really good and solid wingman and a good leader at the club already, which is great to say about a new recruit. But if you're improving anything, it's probably scoreboard impact. He's kicked 41 goals in his 123 AFL games. It's not a great record. He kicked 8 goals last year, which was actually his highest ever goal tally in a year, 8 goals. So, when you got someone who's averaging a 0.3 goals a game, you probably need to bump it up a bit more if you're a wingman, because, look, wingmen are great, structured definers to a team, but the most dangerous wingmen in the comp, the Ollie Dempsey types are the ones who can get forward and hit the scoreboard, the ones that you really have to remain accountable on. And I don't know if Brayden Fiorini right now is a player that opposition teams will be wanting to shut down. I don't think he's that type of player. He will become that player if he adds scoreboard impact to his game, if he drifts forward, hit the scoreboard, while also remaining accountable the other way. So, I think if he wants to take that next step forward, hit the scoreboard more, as a player as he is now, though, I think he's a really good player, and I think we're going to like him a lot when he starts to play for us round 1 next year. Matt Guelfi, the Prince of Perth. I'm going to be a bit of a cop-out here and say that Matt Guelfi needs to stay on the park, stay fit. I think I could have said this for a few players already, but I think it actually applies more with someone like Matt Guelfi, who, same conversation as Setterfield, in that he's limited to what he can do on the footy field. This isn't a game-breaking player, I'd say, Matt Guelfi, but at his best, he is, again, a game-defining player, and he's a really good role player for us in the forward line. In fact, I'd go as far as to say that some of the best defensive performances from Essendon in the last few years have been from Matt Guelfi, because he is that negating forward who can shut down the better defenders, and a wider range of defenders too. He shut down James Sicily in round 1 last year and really annoyed him. He shut down Lachie Whitfield against the Giants on Marvel and kicked a few goals in the process as well. So this guy at his best can change the outcome of games, or assist in changing the outcome of games. I think what he needs is to really just stay on the park, because this guy hasn't played more than 13 games in a season since 2022. He's often playing interrupted blocks of footy, so he's rarely 100% fit. As a depth player, what he does with his actual footy, I like, but the annoying thing is he's often playing games, so, his best games will be followed up by an injury, or he's, coming back of injury for a few games, getting settled in. Once he settles, he, has a recurrence or something like that. He hasn't had a proper block of footy that I can remember in a long, long time. And the last time he did, it was probably in the year that he was top 3 in the Crichton medal. So I think we sleep on Matt Guelfi a little bit. He's one of the more underrated players on our list, but we don't really see it because he doesn't stay on the park. So a full season out of Matt Guelfi in 2026 does no harm to the Bombers. Darcy Parish. This is probably the hardest one to really nail or knuckle down in the video, because he hasn't really played footy in a long time, or proper footy. We talk about Matt Guelfi not getting a good run at things. Darcy Parish, how many games did he play in 2025? Not many at all. So this guy has really just had an uninterrupted run of games since that All-Australian year in 2021. So what we need, again, for starters, to stay on the park, Darcy Parish. But after that, what we probably need to see from him to, ensure us that he's a certified best 23 player, because realistically, we don't actually know that he is, because he hasn't played footy in so long. But what we need to see from him when he comes back is for him to buy in defensively. I think that is something you don't always say about Darcy Parish, is that he's not the best defensive midfielder. I like his accumulation. He's a hands on the footy type player, and when he's playing, he's usually winning clearances and plugging holes. Going forward as well, he's often a target for kickouts because of that, and he's a very good uncontested ball winner. Darcy Parish, he finds the footy really easily. I think what we need to see from this team structure going forward is all our defenders buying in defensively, running both ways, and Darcy Parish, nearing 30, is he going to be able to do that? That's going to be the question, I think, for me this year with Darcy Parish, whether or not he can buy in defensively to the team structure and be that two-way running midfielder, that hybrid midfielder, because right now, what is he? He's an inside accumulator is what I'd say he is. So, yeah, Darcy Parish needs to buy in defensively to the team structure. Kyle Langford, I'm going to go a bit rogue here, because this is something that I argued against for Harry Jones. I would love to see Kyle Langford improve his positional versatility. It's a really interesting one, because he kicked 100 goals in 2 years or something close to that in 2023 and 2024. He was genuinely one of the better key marking targets in the competition. He was kicking goals regularly in pretty bad teams those years as well. What was really interesting to see was him struggle this year when coming back from injury, and how different he looked later in the year when he was playing kind of an outside role on the wing. And that's the thing with Kyle Langford, is that if we made this video 5 years ago and I said he needs to improve his positional versatility, you guys would think I'm crazy, because he was probably in the same position that Harry Jones was in. He couldn't lock down a role. He was playing midfield, wing, forward. He was actually tipped to play defence until the injury to Peter Wright in 2023, when he moved up forward, up the ground. So he's been absolutely everywhere, all over the field, and it didn't work for him. He knuckles down on a roll, but I think with that confidence, with that maturity, with hopefully his body back to its best, I think now is a really good time for Kyle Langford to be a bit of a utility. I think, with younger players, with Harry Jones, being a utility doesn't really help you because you haven't excelled in one role. I've seen Kyle Langford excel in a few roles now, and I think it's enough time that he can, play all these roles at a higher level, like we saw in 2025 when he finished the year on the wing. He was great against St Kilda. I'd love to see him play, as a utility, as a bench option who you can play on the wing, play in the forward line, play behind the ball, which he's done as well. I think Kyle Langford, it would unlock more for our forward line and, create more opportunities for guys like Archer May potentially as well. Yeah, I think Kyle Langford is someone who, if he improves his positional versatility, I think it could do good things for the Bombers in 2026. 2 meter Peter Wright. I think for Peter Wright, I'm going to go similar or the same to Mason Redman, but with a different meaning. I think Peter Wright needs to become more aggressive and improve his aggression at the contest. I think with Mason Redman, it's about that leadership-based aggression and what he does to drive the other boys and the standards from the team. With Peter Wright, it's about really owning the marking contest and not just being a high marking key forward who's, really great because of his footballing ability, but be a feared player. I look at guys like Riley Thilthorpe, who is a similar build to Peter Wright. He is a feared player in the AFL. You don't want to go up against him. I wouldn't say that's the same with Peter Wright. And I don't know if it's since that suspension where he knocked out the Sydney Harry Cunningham in that marking contest. I don't know if it's since then he's held back, but it doesn't feel like Peter Wright is a feared player or an AFL player. He's a good AFL player and can kick bags of goals at his best, but I don't think he's feared. And I think once you get that level of not just respect but fear for your opponent, it is a lot harder to defend them. And that's why Riley Thilthorpe is such a good player. You wouldn't look at Riley Thilthorpe and say, aside from his natural strength, that he's a more gifted player than Peter Wright. I think it's mostly the mindset. I think Peter Wright is a really capable AFL player, but doesn't quite have that hurt factor and that fear factor that the best key forwards in the competition have. And finally, our oldest, most senior player on the team, it is Zach Merrett. That feels weird, the fact that he is the oldest on Essendon's list, doesn't it? Now, we're not going to talk about the trade. Don't mention the trade. We're going faulty towers on this. We're going to talk about his game, talk about what he could improve as a player. And I think for years now, it's been scoreboard impact. Whether or not Zach Merrett is a genuinely, elite midfielder of the comp kind of depends on that. The season that he's All-Australian, he's usually having more of an impact going forward. The seasons where he's not even considered are when he's, not hitting the scoreboard, like in 2025. This guy has averaged 0.3 career goals a game for his career. In 2024, his highest output was 14 goals, really good year. Then he kicked 9 in 2025. And it's odd because you see individual games, like he kicked 4 against the Crows this year and then in one game, and then 5 for the rest of the season. Like that doesn't make a lot of sense. 3 against West Coast in 2024. He can turn it up in the forward line and play a genuine role inside forward 50, but he doesn't hit the scoreboard consistently enough, which for a player that is that good on his left foot, it's odd. You see him trying to pass off more than he should shoot. I think it's a confidence issue. I think he knows that he's not as good in front of the sticks as what he could be to be a better player in the competition. If he was to ever have a Brownlow charge, another All-Australian season, it would be because he's hitting the scoreboard more. And that's what we want from Zach Merrett. We know he's our best player, but if he wants to improve like he always does, he'll be adding a few more goals to his tally in 2026. But guys, that is all I've got to discuss for the year. We are done for the year now. That is the last video. Again, massive thank you for the support. You guys have been absolutely awesome, and I'm keen to run it back again in 2026, hopefully bigger and better things. Let me know down below what you think. If I've got anything wrong in this particular video, I have a chat in the comments down below. I'll see you in 2026. I might have a little break for a few days or maybe a week or so to start the year, but I'll be back in 2026 and we'll be chatting more Essendon related footy. Thank you for watching, guys. Thank you for the year. Make sure you like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, and go Bombers. That one doesn't even do it.